Hello and welcome to the SBK Betting Podcast. The Premier League might be on a staggered winter break, but there is certainly no break for us. Over the next half an hour, we're going to be giving you all the information you need ahead of a busy weekend of football. My name is Alex Brinton. I'm actually all alone this week. I've got Issy and Freddie are joining me virtually. Freddie is so upset by Arsenal's form, he's run away to France. Is that right, Freddie?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very disappointing at the moment. So can't stay in the country. Too many Spurs fans around me. So yeah.
And Issy, you've been a bit busy over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, it feels like it. It feels like I've been here, there and everywhere with press conferences. I've particularly been covering Fulham, which has been great. Obviously, in the midst of a League Cup semi-final for the first time ever, doing lots of interviews with Marco Silva. So I've been loving life, to be honest. Can't complain. Obviously, I'm a Fulham fan, so it's great.
Great stuff. So looking back at last week, we did sort of an FA Cup special with a few sort of upsets thrown in. I think, happily for me, my upset didn't come off as mine was for Borough to beat Villa. We all unfortunately missed our upsets, so no big odds wins for us. But in terms of like the all-round correct selections, Issy led the way with 4, smashing our acca out the park. Love to see it. I got 3 and Freddie got 3. Mine, I have to say, on a couple of occasions, looked quite precarious when Bournemouth went 2-0 down and then against QPR and then won 3-2. And then also, Blackpool were beating Forest 2-0 and that did end up 2-2. So that's what let me down, unfortunately. Now, this week, we're going to be focusing on the biggest game of the weekend, which is Newcastle v Manchester City. Issy, we've just 5 matches this weekend as we have this sort of staggered winter break that the Premier League are doing this year. How are you feeling about it? And it's a bit of a light schedule.
I mean, from a journalist's perspective, it's great to have a bit of breathing space. I'm sure the clubs feel that as well. And I think what we lack in quantity, we kind of make up for in quality. I think all the fixtures I've looked at have the potential to be really exciting. Obviously, I've got my eyes on that Fulham, Chelsea, West London derby. But I think a lot of the ties add a lot of suspension to the title race too. We've got Villa against Everton, 3 points behind Liverpool, and City facing Newcastle, 5 points behind Liverpool. So it's equally as exciting as it would be to have all of those fixtures.
And we've seen Newcastle's defence struggle in recent weeks, most notably against Liverpool when they conceded an XG of 7 points something, which is the most in Premier League history. What do you think needs to change?
Their defence has been so poor recently. An interesting stat that I've come across is that their expected goals against in the last 10 games has been 23.6 compared to 10.3 in the previous 10 games. So that just shows how much of a decline the defence has seen. That stat's doubled. Their expected goals against has doubled compared to the previous 10 games. I think the main thing that they're struggling with is that the press just isn't working like it used to. A lot of individuals pressing, not getting backed up by the rest of the team. And that's really maybe down to the lack of fitness and the physicality of having to play in the Champions League as well as the Premier League and the other competitions. Bruno G is just being asked to do too much as well. He's playing a 10 role pressing and then he's not able to get back and kind of play the 6 role as well. They're just asking too much of him. So I think there's quite a lot going wrong in that defence at the moment, which is weird considering last season it was so strong.
And Newcastle has sort of been heavily linked with Calvin Phillips since the Tonali ban came through. Obviously a Manchester City player at the moment. Do you think that this could be a good move for him as we sort of look towards the Euros, or maybe do you think Newcastle could be looking elsewhere?
No, I think it is a good move. I think just in terms of Newcastle's transfer window in general, it's good to have a bit of context in that aspect because I think everyone thought they'd make a flying start to this January transfer window, but it's obviously been quite quiet at St James's Park on the recruitment front, which has not really been unexpected, to be honest. I think Eddie Howe kind of made a point of signalling the kind of financial fair play factor very early in this window. And obviously, I think Newcastle, just from speaking to colleagues and things like that, it's expected that they'll wait till the kind of latter stages of the window to see exactly where they're at. And they want to see where they're at with injuries before jumping in. And obviously, if you look at the Premier League kind of window, this window for the Prem clubs in general, no one's really made any major moves. But I think for Newcastle, just in terms of your question, I think signing Phillips on loan seems like the most sensible deal for them. There's a number of factors to kind of take into consideration, though. There's an astronomical loan fee of 7.5 million. There'd be a massive contribution to his wages, which is a massive hurdle that other clubs haven't been able to get over yet. It's not to say Newcastle can't. And it's whether he's obviously part of that world famous stellar agency group. It's whether they can come to a deal on that. Lots of things that could be taken into consideration. But just in terms of like looking at the stats, they need to make use of this window because injuries have stretched Eddie Howe's side so thin that 30 players that they have used this season is the most of any team. So this is a crucial point for them.
Freddie, how much do you think injuries are to blame for Newcastle's drop-off? Like, there's been, obviously, you can't really ignore the injury problems that they've had. But do you think at times they've been a bit sort of naive and haven't really managed the workloads as well as they probably should have?
Yeah, 100%. I think that kind of comes with them not having been in Europe for a very long time. Eddie Howe never having managed in Europe. So there is a little bit of that naivety, I guess, with being in that for the first time. As Issy mentioned, they have used the most players in the Premier League this year, so injuries have definitely had an impact. But then there's this interesting stat that if all matches ended at 75 minutes, Newcastle would be fourth in the league instead of ninth. So that just kind of highlights how much they're struggling in that last 15 to 20 minutes. And Eddie Howe hasn't really dialed back on the press that he's asking from the players. So that is taking so much intensity, so much work rate to execute it, that maybe he should pull back on that a little bit. And maybe they can see out those last 15, 20 minutes a bit better than they have been so far this season.
And is he one of Newcastle's strengths last season and at the start of this season as well, was their sort of pace in transition with people like Gordon and Isak? They've sort of struggled to find and be able to play in that way so much this year. But with City, you always expect them to dominate the ball even away from home. So do you think this might sort of play into Newcastle's hands a little bit?
It's kind of like a double-edged sword and a bit of a weird one because I feel like Newcastle with this kind of newfound successful status that they have has actually had its drawbacks. Obviously, you touched on last season and kind of, well, last season in looking at the stats, they had the minority of possession in 17 out of their 38 games. So they were kind of viewed as a smaller club and they excelled when kind of playing in transition and things like that. But this season, opponents, probably like City, are treating them like a big team. So they've only had the minority of possession in 5 out of 20 games. So they are having to adjust to this. And I think Freddie touched on it brilliantly in the sense that like Eddie Howe is still kind of trying to use that pace and power and things like that, but like still going with that kind of methodology and things like that. But it's harder this season. It's harder to kind of execute that game plan. So I think I'm not sure it's necessarily going to play into Newcastle's hands in answer to your question.
Interesting. And Freddie, with the break after this match, is this like a chance for Newcastle to sort of say, oh, right, we can really put the first half of our season behind us and we can get back on track now?
Yeah, I mean, a win against City will give anyone a confidence boost, right? Especially this City that it feels impending that they're about to boom, I guess, with Haaland and KDB somewhat on their way back. But Newcastle, their season is in a little bit of trouble. They are 11 points off top four. So if you're looking at their success last season, I guess Newcastle fans would be kind of wanting to replicate that. So that seems pretty unlikely, but they are only 2 points off European football. So I guess that should be the aim. If you get a win against City, you're way back in that mix for European football next year, which also helps them to spend more money. And that's a good achievement. It might not be top four, but it is still Europe.
And coming straight back to you, mate, we saw the return of KDB this weekend, as you just touched on. I think he got an assist in something like 10 minutes or something absolutely obscene. How much do you reckon, how much of an impact do you think he can have on City's season?
Yeah, I think Klopp was quoted saying the whole country is starting to shake with the news that KDB was coming back, and I'm certainly starting to shake. That's very scary, the prospect of him coming back. I think they'll ease him back in for sure. With a hamstring injury when he's been out for 5 months, they definitely should ease him back in. You've seen what happens to the likes of Reece James with hamstring injuries and it being a recurring injury. So I think they'll be careful with it. But they have the luxury to be able to ease him back in because they have such quality players. 18 assists last year for KDB. So it just feels like he's going to come back in and this City team are going to do what they tend to do in the second half of the season and just play incredibly and destroy everyone. But we'll see whether that actually happens.
And Issy Haaland has also returned to training this week, and another ominous sign for the rest of the league. He's still actually the joint top goal scorer somehow, despite having not played since the 1-0 win against Aston Villa. How impressed with him have you been this year? Obviously, like last year, we sort of got massively, like, we didn't know what we were expecting, and then he came in and sort of blew all expectations out of the water. But what about this year?
Yeah, it's like, how do you top a record-breaking debut season that ended with like 3 winners' medals, a nod for PFA Player of the Year? And I guess that was the question he was facing in summer, but he's still just done brilliantly this season. It's an absolute joy having him in this country, in this league. He's still breaking records. Obviously, I think it won't surprise me if the records continue to kind of tumble this season. I think critics kind of like highlighted his lack of involvement and general play and kind of had the knives out during that kind of spell in October where he didn't maybe do a great deal in terms of Haaland's numbers, but obviously it didn't last. Having him back is such a menacing, ominous prospect. So I fear for the rest of the league, to be honest.
Yeah, it really is. And this fixture is really one that City have sort of dominated in the last few years. They've literally only lost twice in the league in the last 10 seasons, but they did lose here and in the EFL Cup at the start of the season. Freddie, do you think City will be still at their dominant best despite that?
Yeah, I think so. I think there must be a really feel-good feeling around City right now within that dressing room. I think if I was in that squad, you'd be thinking, okay, Haaland and KDB are back. This is when we really start to turn it on. We've had somewhat of a, by City standard, poor start to the season. But now they'll kind of start to become this dominant team that we've seen over the prior years. But I think last year as well, as you mentioned, they lost in the EFL Cup, but then last year was a screamer of a game as well, 3-3. So I think that kind of game could potentially happen again. St James's is a funny place. So we'll see how it goes.
And talking about St James's being sort of a funny place, they do have the 3rd best home record in the league this season. Will City be sort of, in any way, will they be intimidated by that, Issy?
I've got to be honest, I don't think so. Obviously, we know that St James's Park, well, for me, like in my experience of going to games, as a fan and as a reporter, I've always felt like St James's Park is on par with Anfield as one of the most menacing stadiums to go in this country. But when you look at both teams on paper and the context at the minute surrounding them, I really don't think so. As Freddie touched on, this is that time where City just go up another gear and that squad, that quality on paper just really excels and comes into fruition. And obviously looking at Newcastle, they've been so sporadic. We've touched on it plenty of times and in other pods as well, those injuries and things like that. I just really don't think it's something that's going to bother City.
Fair enough. All right, let's move on to our bet builder predictions. As you've done all the talking for the last few minutes, I'm going to take the first one here. I've got Man City to win the second half, Bruno to get booked, and Man City over 1.5 goals, and that is at 5.1 with SBK at the moment. So City's to win the second half, purely because as we've touched on, how much Newcastle have dropped off in the last sort of 15, 20 minutes of games, and City are going to be keeping the ball, and they're, if anything, going to tire a bit quicker. No Bruno to be booked. Now, no player has been booked more than Bruno this season, with 8 cards in the Premier League. He has been booked in the last 5 matches in a row, including both the FA Cup and the EFL Cup, which sort of makes me think surely he's not going to get booked for 6 games in a row. But if he was a goal scorer, you'd be going with that form. So that's why I'm going to run with it. And Man City over 1.5 goals. They're averaging 2.3 at the moment. And as Freddie, you touched on your answer earlier, Newcastle's defence has been especially poor in recent weeks. City have scored in every single league meeting between these two sides since a 0-0 draw in November 2006. So, ominous for Newcastle. Freddie, what have you got, mate?
So we're thinking across quite similar lines here, Alex. I've gone over 2.5 goals in the game, Bruno Guimaraes card, and over 8.5 corners at 5.9. So out of the last 4 games at St James's Park, we've had a 7-goal game, a 4-goal game, a 6-goal game, and a measly 1-goal game last year. But they're very, very entertaining games. They tend to be. So that should hopefully come in with lots of goal scorers on the pitch. And then Bruno G, as you've touched on, my main reasoning was he's been booked in his last 5 games against City. He's going to have to make fouls and probably pick up a 6th yellow in a row. And then just on corners, games involving Newcastle are averaging 9.25 corners a game, and games involving City are averaging 9.85. So that's why I've gone for the 8.5 corners.
Perfect. And Issy, to round us off, what have you got?
So I feel mine's a little bit simplistic compared to your guys's, but I've gone City to win, both teams to score, and Julian Alvarez to score, and that's at 4.5 on SBK. In the Premier League, so Man City to win in the Premier League era, City have won more games, scored more goals, and kept more clean sheets against Newcastle than they have against any other team. Newcastle have won just once in the last 32 league meetings, but on both teams to score, we obviously touched on Newcastle having that fortress at St James's Park, and they've scored in all 10 home games this season, and only Liverpool have amassed more expected goals on their home turf. And then Alvarez to score, finishing it off. He's got 5 goals and an assist in his last 4 matches. Got the winner in August when these sides last clashed in the league, and I reckon he can bag another goal to help City win.
Perfect. And now for our acca prediction. So it's a 4-team acca from all of us individually. I'll be honest, I was a bit scared by the Premier League fixtures this weekend. Aside from City Newcastle, which I sort of feel like City should win, I could see doubts over all of them. So I've gone fully EFL. Okay, so I've got West Brom to beat Blackburn, Millwall to beat Middlesbrough, Southampton to beat Sheffield Wednesday, and Mansfield to beat Morecambe, and that is at 9.6. West Brom to beat Blackburn to kick us off. West Brom are 5th. They've been on a decent run of form and have actually the 5th best home record in the league. Blackburn, who are 17th, have only won once since the start of December. They were behind twice against Cambridge in the FA Cup at the weekend, but ran out winners. And only QPR have worse form in the league over the last 6 matches. Millwall to beat Middlesbrough now. I'm not just being a bit of a sour Villa fan and wanting to rub it in. Borough have played 2 games against Premier League opposition in the last week. Villa had 62% possession, Chelsea 72%. 2 players also went off for Borough after just 20 minutes. So my whole reason is that they're going to be absolutely knackered, and they're going to had come from a massive high. They did really well to beat Chelsea, but it's going to be tough going to the Den on Saturday. Millwall, meanwhile, are in good form, winning 3 of their last 4 matches. Southampton to beat Sheffield Wednesday. I mean, Danny Rolls, since he's come in Sheffield Wednesday, has done a fantastic job, and this is nothing against him, but I just think Southampton will just have too much for them, really. Over the last 12 games in the Championship, Saints have the best record in the league and haven't tasted defeat since September 23rd, I should say. Mansfield to beat Morecambe. Mansfield are just 2 points off the top with the game in hand. They're 3rd in the table over the last 12 games, winning 8, and they're playing a Morecambe side who are 18th over the same period, losing 6 of their games, and that is again at 9.6. Freddie, take us away, mate.
So I've also gone fully EFL. I was with you that the Premier League games were quite scary this weekend. So I've gone Blackpool to beat Exeter, Crewe to beat Swindon, Portsmouth to beat Leyton Orient, and Bolton to beat Cheltenham at 6.6. So Blackpool to beat Exeter. Blackpool are currently 8th, but they're top of the league based on their home form. So they're 1 point ahead of both Bolton and Portsmouth in points won at home this season. Exeter, they're currently sitting in 20th, 1 place outside the relegation zone. They haven't won an away game in the league since September 2nd. So last year now, it's been a while. So back Blackpool to win that one. And then Crewe to beat Swindon. Crewe, they're currently in 5th. They've recovered from their bad run of form and now unbeaten in the last 3. They've also got very good home form, 4th best home form in the league. And Swindon are in a poor run of form. They've only won 1 of their last 7 games. So back in Crewe to win that one. Then Portsmouth to beat Leyton Orient. Portsmouth have won each of their last 4 against Orient in all comps, including twice this season. So they've beaten them once in the EFL Trophy and once in the league. So not looking great for Orient based on that. And then Orient have only lost one of their last 5, but that loss came to Bolton, who are of a similar calibre to Portsmouth, both of them challenging for the top of the league up there. So I think Portsmouth will get that one done. And then Bolton to beat Cheltenham. Bolton currently second, Cheltenham currently 22nd. Bolton are in great form. They've won their last 4 games. Their last 5 games, they've won 4 of their last 5, and in 4 of them they've kept clean sheets. They just drew away as well to Luton. That was my upset prediction last week. It didn't quite come in, but they did draw against Premier League opposition, and Cheltenham away performances have been pretty poor this year. They're sitting in 20th in the league based on their away performances. So I think Bolton will get that one done as well. And that's once again at 6.6 on SBK.
Perfect. Izzy, what have you got for us?
It's another hat trick of EFL choices, because I nearly went for a Prem choice and I veered away from it. I also struggled a little bit with the Championship as well, but I've gone Southampton to beat Sheffield Wednesday, Leeds to draw with Cardiff, Wickham to beat Lincoln City, and Bolton to beat Cheltenham as well. And that's at 14 on SBK. Starting with Southampton, obviously you kind of touched on it, Alex, but just having an excellent campaign, charging towards those automatic promotion places, closed a big gap that separated them and Ipswich Town. Coming into this game in outstanding form, unbeaten in their last 19 games. I just thought that was incredible. Very strong at home this season. So yeah, that kind of easily made my decision there. Moving on to Leeds to draw with Cardiff. Right, I did almost went for Leeds to beat Cardiff, but actually, if you've really got to do your research on this, and this fixture has always been really close in recent years. It was a 2-2 draw when Cardiff last faced Leeds, but that was at Elland Road. Last 5 games between Cardiff, 3 of them have been draws, and then both teams have won 1 in the last 5. And also, obviously, Leeds are superior in their league position, but their poor away record and the fact that Cardiff have a home advantage just really skewed me picking a winner. So definitely gone for a draw with that one. Moving on to Wickham, kind of more delved into the stats on this one. Unbeaten in 4 of their past 5 home outing trips, hosting games. And in this head-to-head, looking at the head-to-head stats, they are unbeaten in 6 of their past 7 clashes at Lincoln at their home stadium. So that massively played into it. Lincoln in poor form following a 4-game winless streak with their league matches on the road. So yeah, expecting a Wickham win for that one. And obviously Freddie touched on the Bolton-Cheltenham fixture, but again, delved into the stats on this one. I think he mentioned it, but yeah, Bolton Wanderers have won 4 consecutive matches, 7 of their past 10 home matches, whereas Cheltenham, in pretty woeful form, have failed to score in 5 of their last 10 away trips and have lost 6 of 10 of them. So that played into that one as well. So yeah, really looking forward to having a close eye on the EFL this weekend. Yeah,
definitely. It'll be nice. And it's funny how we've all sort of decided the Premier League's a bit too scary this week. Moving on to our goal scorer picks. Now, the rule with this is that you can't pick Haaland, but as he hasn't been playing for the last few weeks, that's not been a problem. But there's rumours he's back. So, again, that rule is back in place. I'm kicking off with Cole Palmer at 3.25. He scored 8 goals so far this season in the Premier League in 16 games. And he did have a little bit of a stinker against Middlesbrough in midweek. But I do think he's a player of sort of real high quality and that sort of high great mentality. I think like he'll sort of really bounce back, and I can really see this being a game where he does get chances, and I think he'll have no issue in slotting one of them away. Unfortunately for you, Issy. Freddie, what have you got, mate?
I've gone Elijah Adebayo for Luton at 4.3. He's already scored against Burnley this season in their 2-1 loss at at Kenilworth Road, and he's got goals against Chelsea, City and Arsenal, so he's in decent goal scoring form this year. Was obviously a key player in their playoff run last year. So I'll back him to get it done at those odds as well.
And Izzy, what have you got?
Got my eye on that Fulham Chelsea fixture, but I'm backing my team. I'm backing my side, and I'm up my players. I've gone with Bobby Dickles over Reed against Chelsea. That's at 5.9 on SBK. He's in incredible form. He's not obviously their out and out goal scorer, their striker, but he's got 2 goals in their last 3 games. He's on fire for Fulham. Important goals too. It was the winner against Arsenal, I believe, and against Rotherham in the FA Cup. And then you look at Chelsea, they've got a pretty leaky defence. They're actually ranked 13th for clean sheets and with just 4 this season. So definitely expecting Fulham to get some goals for sure.
Lovely. Well, thank you guys, and thank you very much for listening. If you've made it this far, then well done. Hopefully we've given you everything that you need ahead of another busy weekend of football. And remember that new customers can get £30 in free bets when you sign up and place your first bet of just £10. T&Cs apply. Thank you for listening.